Welcome to the EXECUpreneurs Edge podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Graber, a holistic healthcare doc turned execupreneur change agent. I'm a startup junkie, keto enthusiast, and a people-pleasing perfectionist in recovery, that is. The EXECUpreneurs Edge focuses on the why behind the what and the how. See, when you are clear why you do the things you do, you'll stack the success deck in your favor on the daily. I specialize in helping entrepreneurs and corporate executives who are frustrated with where they are in their professional life. Either they're burned out, have hit that proverbial glass ceiling, or they're spinning their wheels wondering if this is all they've got to look forward to for another decade or several. The underlying factor at work when a client hires me is they can no longer ignore the fact that they are unable to break through the barrier between where they are now and where they deeply desire to be. These are my people, for they are where I once was. They're trying to do the right thing, but they're continually caught in this revolving door of failure. Just when they think they've busted through to the other side, something else rears its ugly mug, and they're swooped back into the door's centrifugal force. Revolution after revolution. Consider this podcast your thrice weekly dose of Dramamine. Now I have but one goal for this podcast. It is to help you design a life you love, and then build your business around it. Want to know how you do that? Subscribe today and join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when we'll unpack another aspect of the EXECUpreneurs journey together. The first E in the EXECUpreneurs Edge acronym is for energy. For without boundless energy, you are practicing hope and pray success. And that is something successful execupreneurs do not do. Successful execupreneurs seek guidance from those who have their best interest in mind, not just the best interests of the influencers, stockholders. They also know that their mental, emotional, and physical energy must be available 100% of the time so they can focus on the business at hand, not what's for lunch. One major distinguishing factor of an execupreneur is their ability to think for themselves, and they are in the habit of making decisions based on fact, not fallacy. Unfortunately, fallacy has been in the driver's seat for far too long, and greed has been riding shotgun. Not a pretty combo, especially when it comes to nutritional advice handed down to the American public for the past 60 years. Give or take. In this episode, which I have lovingly titled Cholesterol is Your Enemy and Other Nutritional Nonsense You Should Ignore, I will shine a light on the cholesterol controversy with the intent to help you make your best and most informed decision. When it comes to energy, what you do and what you don't do can play equally important roles when it comes to fueling our incredible bodies and brains. Don't leave out the brain, for it is our most important business asset. And cholesterol is critical to its health and the health of pretty much every cell in us. I'm sure there's a lawyer somewhere right now holding their breath, so I'll get this legalese stuff out of the way now. Ready? All right, I am not a licensed medical doctor, nor do I play one on the internet. The information I share is my opinion and a summation based upon decades of study and practice in the space of holistic health. I have never, nor would I ever, write a prescription for this junk. Oops. That last part wasn't technically legalese, but it is exactly how I feel, and we still have freedom of speech, so I am exercising mine. This is a longer than usual episode, for there is a lot to unpack in this myth-busting episode of the EXECUpreneurs Edge podcast. Let's get to it. Cholesterol is your enemy, or so you've been led to believe. Cholesterol does more than just wander around the blood trying to kill us. It doesn't do that at all, folks. But if you've bought into conventional wisdom's brainwashing, you'd think it showed up with its hooded cape and sickle, determined to wreak havoc at every bend in the vessel road. If you have a liver and a pulse, you are making your own cholesterol, and be thankful you are. Cholesterol is critical to life. The human body uses cholesterol to make a wide assortment of substances needed to sustain life. Cholesterol is the backbone for steroid hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, cortisol too. Cholesterol is also at work when it comes to digestion, healing damaged tissue, and forming the cellular membranes discussed when exposing the eating fat makes you fat lie. That was a few episodes ago. To add to cholesterol's resume, the ever-coveted vitamin D is made from it. Cholesterol is not a menace, nor an enemy. It's the furthest thing from it. In fact, it sounds like it's a pretty important substance to have in the body. Would you agree? So why is something your body makes all day, every day, deemed public enemy number one? The long and the short of it? There's money in the war on cholesterol, and lots of it. Big Pharma makes big moolah from statins and all the other mayhem in their wake. I'm talking big money, in the neighborhood of 10 billion with a B yearly on statins in the US alone, triple that worldwide. Many of the tried and true statins are coming off patent, meaning they're going generic, so Big Pharma is pumping out newer, shinier versions to fatten up the coffers. FYI, a drug remains patent protected for 20 years-ish on average. It costs more than we mere mortals can imagine, along with a decent amount of time to get a drug from patent to approval for sale. So, to reward the formulating company, the FDA, or the Federal Drug Administration, allows them ample time to sop up all the money their greedy little hands can hold, all while some patients choose between food and medicine, a reality all too many face needlessly. If only they understood how food can be their medicine. This is fuel to my fire for illuminating the truth that your body can heal itself when the choices you make with your fork favor health. Approximately 80% of the cholesterol in your body is made by you, in your liver, and a small amount added through resorption by the small intestines, along with a tiny contribution from individual cells. The rest comes from your food. The body is constantly regulating the amount it makes based upon need as well as supply. Statins block an enzyme your liver produces to make cholesterol. That's how they work. In addition to monkeying with the liver, statins have seriously damaging side effects. In addition to muscle cramps, gastrointestinal problems, headaches, and trouble sleeping, statins carry warnings that mental confusion, memory loss, high blood sugar, and type 2 diabetes are all possible side effects. Excuse me? I think not, especially since 95% of those taking statins have no valid reason for doing so. More on this a little later. Let me lay out some basics so we are on the same page. It's important to understand the specifics of cholesterol. Cholesterol is waxy and fatty, and, like oil and water, doesn't mix well with blood. This fact dictates the necessity for the protective carriers, which are your LDL, HDL, and all the other DLs known to man, at least in this situation. Two types of quote-unquote cholesterol get the most airtime. They are LDL and HDL, but neither are cholesterol, by the way. They are actually proteins, lipoproteins to be exact. LDL stands for low-density lipoprotein, and it certainly is not bad, like you have been led to believe. HDL is also a lipoprotein, though one with high density. Lipoproteins, or lipoproteins, depending how you say it, they function to transport cholesterol to and from various parts of the body through the bloodstream. I like to use the analogy of fighting a fire. The LDL is the fire truck full of cholesterol fresh from the liver. Here's why I like to use this analogy. I envision the handsome fireman. I know, sexist, but let me have this one, please, okay? The fresh cholesterol is on its way to do good deeds in the community or to the scene of the fire. Think injury, inflammation, etc. The HDL is the fire truck with the exhausted cholesterol, or the handsome fireman, returning to the liver for recycling or reinforcements. To sum it up, LDL delivers cholesterol to the site of need, and HDL brings it back to your liver for recycling. One very important distinction is that LDL is not just a free ride for cholesterol. LDL also distributes the energy produced from the breakdown of fats to cells throughout the body, more specifically, triglycerides. Triglycerides are used for energy by your heart, skeletal muscles, and your adipose tissue, which is body fat. This here, my friend, this is like jet fuel for the human. Along with cholesterol and triglyceride, you'll find the fat-soluble vitamins, your A, D, E, and K, doing the same ride sharing on the LDL truck. Sounds to me like LDL is more helper than menace. And while we're throwing love its way, it is a multitasker extraordinaire. Some would argue that LDL's primary role in the body is that of triglyceride distributor, especially when fat-fueled. And being fat-fueled is what I am all about. So labeling LDL, the bad cholesterol, is like blaming the firefighter for the fire. Just because the firefighter is there doesn't mean that they are responsible for it. Nobody in their right mind would think that way anyway. So why do we blame cholesterol for the clot when it is just trying to put out the flames of inflammation and tend to the damage? Makes no sense to me either. All right, so we've discussed the duties of LDL and HDL. LDL is like a fire truck delivering cholesterol and other necessities to the body. Remember the fireman. HDL returns the exhausted cholesterol and other cellular end products back to the liver for recycling and reinforcements. LDL gets a bad rap, although it is just reporting for duty. To complicate things further, there are different types of LDL, because of course this cannot be simple and straightforward, right? It's science, folks. So there's the fluffy kind, and then there's the more dense kind. It is at this level of differentiation that LDL gets its reputation as friend or foe. I argue that they are both on our side. They're just doing their job. The smaller, more compact version of LDL is blamed for being at the site of vessel injury and ultimately the clot. I urge you to look deeper. Why is the dense, more compact version of LDL there in the first place? I'll tell you. It's present because there is endothelial damage. More on this in a moment. The smaller version of LDL is the only particle that can wedge its way into the damaged tissue to try to stabilize the area so that that vessel will not burst with the very next heartbeat. The fluffy LDL simply won't fit, and due to its fluffiness, it won't plug up much in the way of damage. Now, I bet you've never heard this information before. So let's review some history. A well-known and often referenced study started in the 1950s called the Framingham Heart Study. Approximately 5,200 people have been followed for decades to make conclusions about influences on their heart health. When the evaluators saw instances of heart disease, increased levels of LDL were also noted. Therefore, LDL was guilty by association. Never once was the underlying cause of said relationship studied. It was assumed that LDL was the culprit. Ergo, war was waged, and the only true beneficiaries have been Big Pharma and its minions. It is well established that inflammation is an underlying cause. That, along with glycation, are primary drivers for disease, all chronic disease for that matter. And I infer to you that it is the inflammation causing the rise in LDL present at the site, not some sinister move on LDL's part. LDL is merely meeting the demand. Cholesterol becomes rather sticky in certain scenarios, most notably the presence of inflammation. When we talk inflammation of the blood vessels, more specifically the arteries, the terms arterio and atherosclerosis are used, often interchangeably, though incorrectly. Arteriosclerosis is the hardening of the arteries. The vessels lose their suppleness over time, resulting in lessened resilience or bounce back when the powerful heart contracts. Remember how fats make cells supple? That was again a few episodes ago. That is a major player here. The suppleness of the cells make the vessels more supple. A more specific type of arteriosclerosis is atherosclerosis, aka clogged arteries. The distinction is a very, very important one. Atherosclerosis is a big problem in the U.S. and one of Big Pharma's cash cows. When there is damage to the inner lining of the blood vessel, the body calls in the cavalry to fix it. Depending upon the level of damage, it can be a small production or an all-out act of heroism. Cholesterol is one of the key players in damage control. So how does the damage occur? That is a whole discussion I could spend hours breaking down. But for our purposes here, it starts and ends with endothelial damage. This is damage to the inner lining of our blood vessels. The tissue gets irritated, the irritation causes damage, and just as on the outside of the body when you get a cut, the body rushes to the area with materials to go to work on cleaning up the damage. When the damage is on the surface of our body, we call that patch job a scab. When it's inside, essentially the same thing occurs, but in the vessels we call it a clot. The overall process is called inflammation. Inflammation is critical to our survival. Without it, we would be defenseless. Inflammation on the inside and outside are essentially the same with small differentiations when it comes to the insides of our vessels. We'll call it close enough for this discussion. Deal? All right. It is such a complicated process and one I cover at length in my programs. The he said, she said around the topic of causes of said damage could dizzy a bobblehead doll at Wimbledon. Seriously, the amount of conflicting information circling around this topic is ridiculous. Cholesterol is easily oxidized, think rust, in the presence of inflammation, since inflammation has a plethora of chemical reactions at work. And this is where the problem arises. When this damage is inside the blood vessels, it is bad news to say the least. Not only are we dealing with the narrowing of available space for blood to flow at the clot site, atherosclerosis, we have more rigid vessels to boot, arteriosclerosis. Therefore, they do not dilate as well as healthy ones when pressure comes their way from the powerful heartbeat. So what is cholesterol doing there in the first place? Cholesterol acts as damage control. It covers the clot, the internal scale, in an attempt to smooth it over and bind to the inflammatory proteins being utilized in the damage control. LDL is present in higher concentrations when tissue damage is present. Remember, LDL is the carrier for cholesterol. When you have levels of LDL that are higher than deemed normal, your medical team focuses on the cholesterol, not the reason behind the increase. LDL levels, cholesterol's ride to the scene of the carnage, should increase when there's damage because it has been called into action, aka an increased demand. This is the design of the body, the internal intelligence at work. After all, cholesterol is a major antioxidant and a free radical scavenger, meaning it helps bind things in the blood that do damage and cleans up the mess by sticking to the gunk that we don't want around and transporting that back to the liver for disposal. Mistakenly, LDL has been vilified for simply doing its job. It is present because mayhem is present. Cholesterol is part of the damage control team of the body and therefore should not be blamed for the mess it is merely cleaning up. Plain and simple, until it's not. The cholesterol is your enemy lie has been disseminated for so long, it's now held as fact, even in medical circles. In addition to the Framingham study, conventional wisdom's flawed conclusions are based off of a review of governmental agency-provided data. Not research, mind you. This data is from 1948 to 1949 on middle-aged men, no mention of women. This review concluded that eating fat increased serum cholesterol, which is cholesterol in your blood, and should therefore be replaced with corn oil and, my nemesis and yours, margarine. Sacrilege! Now this lie has fueled millions in advertising dollars by Big Food for low fat, and Big Pharma, statins, and contributed to the brainwashing of a nation. Cholesterol is your enemy, BS. Whew, getting worked up here, y'all. So cholesterol is not a menace, and certainly not a foe. Remember that cellular membrane I mentioned when exposing the eating fat makes you fat lie, again, a few episodes ago. Every cell's membrane is peppered with receptors specific to all sorts of chemicals that we need for survival, for happiness, for immunity, and a whole host of other necessities. Of critical importance in the formation of these receptors is cholesterol. Hello, my friend. Above all else, there is research proving that people with higher cholesterol levels live longer. And isn't living longer what it's all about? I think so. When war is waged on cholesterol, the gauntlet of choice is the statin drug. Some are better known than others. All in all, they work by interrupting your liver's ability to produce cholesterol by blocking a critical enzyme in its production. What they don't do is help you live longer. Yes, you heard that right. There are some conclusions that should you have established heart disease, which is a previous heart attack, angina, etc., you may benefit from statin use. This number is estimated to represent 5% of those who currently use statins. But other than that, in 11 peer-reviewed studies, there is zero evidence of statins making for a longer life. Yes, that means that 95% of those taking statins to save their life are being hoodwinked. And your local Big Pharma CEO thanks you for the sweet ride parked in one of his many garage bays. Statins have become more and more capable of lowering cholesterol over time. Ever notice how the quote-unquote acceptable levels get lower and lower when the guidelines are updated? This falls under the just because you can doesn't mean you should category in my book. Messing with the enzyme cascade of the liver should not be an action taken lightly, especially since the enzyme involved, HMG-CoA reductase, aids in other processes like ketone production, something I am very fond of and will show you exactly why you should be too in time. Subscribe to this podcast to stay in the loop on that. So HMG-CoA reductase is also responsible for the synthesis of vitamin D and the super antioxidant coenzyme Q10. Note, if you are on a statin or know someone who is, please take coenzyme Q10. If you or they are over 40, use the ubiquinol form. You can look that up in all the research papers. Something to ponder. Could the mass vitamin D deficiencies be linked to the war on cholesterol too? When cholesterol levels are too low, the body and mind suffer. There are links to hormone imbalances when cholesterol levels are too low. A 1999 study reported low cholesterol leads to increased incidences of depression or anxiety in young, otherwise healthy women. And if these women became pregnant, low birth weight and premature delivery are an increased risk. Both are on the rise in America. Any correlation? I think so. Making your own cholesterol does not equate to a suicide mission as the big three would have you think, but not making enough just may. When the cell membrane is devoid of adequate cholesterol, the number of serotonin receptors is inadequate. Remember how I mentioned that these receptors are made on a cholesterol backbone. If you don't have enough receptors for serotonin, that is a problem. This directly affects the brain's serotonin level. Now, serotonin is one of your happy chemicals, and violent behavior towards oneself and others is directly related to a lowered number of serotonin receptors. Another growing concern amongst those of us in the 40-plus age group is memory problems. We've all had those moments, from the ever-popular, why did I come in this room, to, what is his name? When referring to your neighbor who you've known for years, but all of a sudden you draw a blank. It's not an all-of-a-sudden event. Too little cholesterol is an unrefuted risk factor for mental deficit and decline of memory in midlife. I propose this is a direct result of a lifetime of following conventional wisdom's advice of eat low fat, more fallout from the fat makes you fat and the cholesterol is your enemy lies. Here's a recap of the lie, cholesterol is your enemy. Cholesterol is the building block for steroid hormones, like your sex hormones and cortisol. Remember, 80% of cholesterol in your body is made in your own body. A mere 20-ish% comes from your food. Your body uses cholesterol for many different critical functions. Cholesterol is public enemy number one in the so-called healthcare system. Since it is at the location of a clot, it is being thrown under the bus by those who do not clearly understand its worth. Just because it is present doesn't mean it is the cause of said blockage. Now, there is big money in the war on cholesterol. Statins are Big Pharma's cash cow. Now remember, it is estimated that 95% of those who take a statin will not live longer by taking them. Yet they stand the exact same chance for suffering from the side effects as the 5% who may benefit from the drug itself. I leave you with this to ponder. Why would your intelligent body be so stupid to make something and use it in every cell if it was our enemy? Food for thought. That's a wrap. I hope you found yourself nodding along in agreement and got a feather or two ruffled, for that means you were paying attention and thinking how the edge applies to your life. That is what I want you to walk away with each and every time you plug in. If you found this information relevant to your life, show a sister some love with a thumbs up and by sharing this link with your network. Be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a BS flag nor an opportunity to lean in and hone your EXECUpreneurs edge. Now go put today's wisdom to work, pronto! For knowledge isn't power, it's power in reserve. Action is where the power comes into play. By putting what you learn into action, you can transform every aspect of your business, heck, your life. Now this is a conversation, not just a monologue. I want to hear from you. What in this episode brought about an aha moment? What in this episode made you a little uncomfortable? A lot of uncomfortable. Spoiler alert, you don't grow in your comfort zone. Nothing changes until you step out of it. This podcast was created to challenge listeners with the tough questions most hosts are too shy, too afraid, or too inexperienced to ask. As you will learn, I am not shy, and man, have I crammed a whole lot of experience into my life. And now that pesky little thing called fear, well, that is something I act in spite of. I truly hope that as you continue to plug in, you will choose to tap into boundless energy, uncover your inner drive, and cultivate the grit of an evolved EXECUpreneur. She's in there, just waiting for you to take action that moves the needle on your life.